Okay, we're back again. This time, episode 43. With you, as always, is me, Chucky, and we've got Jigsaw.
It is your homeboy Jiggy.
True dat. True dat. Yeah, so normally we have 5 movies to discuss, but this time we've actually got 6, because we've had a late edition of a new movie that has not yet been released, but we managed to have a little viewing of it, and so we'll be discussing that one as well. So for today's show, we start off with Magic from 1978, which is I guess you'd say, a psychological horror with Anthony Hopkins. Then up next, we'll be discussing Night Killer from 1990, a bit of an oddball Italian slasher. Then we've got the Attic Expeditions from 2001. I believe it's a direct-to-video horror movie with Jeffrey Combs and Seth Green. After that, we've got Tammy and the T-Rex from 1994. I don't know if I don't know what to say about that. After that, we've got the Toolbox Murders from 1978. I guess some would call that a bit of a classic slasher movie.
It's like a proto slasher.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that. But the final movie, the late edition, is Camp Twilight from 2020. And yeah, so we'll be talking about that one. And even though if you're listening to the full episode now, you'll probably be listening to this months after it's been recorded, but we will have already uploaded that one months earlier in advance, so everyone gets to hear the discussion before the movie comes out.
So, we begin with Magic from 1978. As Chucky said, it's a psychological horror movie in which this guy is a magician with a ventriloquist, becomes, decently well known, but he tries to, I guess you could say, find himself. Some people want to sign him up to like a higher company. He just wants to stay away from any type of, doctor's tests and anything. So he finds a secluded place. He actually meets up with somebody he knew back in school, back when he was a kid. And there's sort of like a romance growing, and all the while he has some psychological issues he's going through, and they result in, you could say, unpleasant situations. And there's also a dummy involved, so that's always fun. So, Magic, if you just happen to come across it, read the plot, it might not sound like that impressive of a movie. I will mention it's almost a 2-hour movie, so there's certainly a lot of things going on in the story, but it's, a moderately simple time. What really, in my opinion, makes it work is Anthony Hopkins' performance. I think it's a fantastic performance. And I can't personally think of, I'm sure Anthony Hopkins has been doing movies for like years and years now, but this is the oldest movie I've seen with Hopkins in it, so that's sort of cool. It has a pretty strong story. When it gets to the, I guess you could say, more horror aspects, I think they're pretty good. They're not necessarily great, but I think what really drives this movie is the psychological torment that Hopkins goes through. And I think there's some scenes that really, really highlight that.
I'm pretty sure I tried watching this a long time ago, but I don't know, never in the mood for it. So I'm going to consider this a first time watch for me, and I thought it was alright. It was sort of, it was definitely slow, which in my mind translated a little bit to boring, at least for the first half. But I did end up enjoying the latter parts, roughly around the time Ed Lalter, he turned up, and there was, that love triangle going on, and then the psychological aspects, that came into play a lot more than it did earlier. So from that point onwards, I had a pretty decent time with it, but everything leading up to that, yeah, it's just, it just, for me, it felt like it was just going through the motions. But I know for others, like I said, if you're really truly enjoying Anthony Hopkins' performance, you'll probably get a little bit more out of that first half than I did. Look, I have no issues with his performance. It just didn't get there for me overall.
So I think probably when I first saw this movie, I may have been in much the same vein up until the scene in which Hopkins and his agent, played by Burgess Meredith, he actually locates him, finds him, says, hey, if you can, not use the damage you talk for like 5 minutes, hey, we're cool, everything's fine. And that scene that follows, him trying to stop himself from using the damage you talk is, I think, probably one of the tensest scenes. It would at least be my top 10 of Savin's movies. It's just because you sort of know he's not going to be able to make it. So you're just sitting there and it's sort of uncomfortable, and Hopkins keeps asking, how long's it been this time, like, and what really makes it scene for me is Burgess Meredith's facial expressions. How he seems so sad, like he knows that this guy's far gone, and he knows that he really needs help, and it just almost it sort of packs a bit of an emotional punch, which I think this movie, being very heavy with its drama, is more apt to do than, I guess you could say, the quote-unquote normal horror movie.
He should have started yelling quotes from Rocky at him. Get up, you bum!
Yes. I've never actually seen Rocky. I'm going to assume Burgess Meredith has seen Rocky.
Yep.
Yeah, to be honest, I mainly know him from the 60s Batman series, playing Penguin, because that was a classic time. But then again, I'm a classic guy. It can be sad that I didn't care that much about the whole romance. I guess it was sort of cute. Well, it was cute. It was cute up until the time he was yelling at her, "Hey, concentrate!" And it's like a bit intense. So it was cute up until that point. But I sort of like seeing the awkward kid get the girl, and unfortunately, it didn't necessarily have a good ending. But
well, it's funny, like, because it's got a dummy in it, I know sometimes it gets thrown around and compared to, like, other doll movies, like Chucky movies, and clearly it's not, anything the same. Like, even, I remember watching I think it was the first Child's Play review by Siskel and Ebert, who are, they're probably the most popular movie reviewers of all time.
Right after us.
Or movie critics, sorry. Yeah, right after us. And I know when they were talking about it, one of them brought up this movie Magic and said, well, I enjoyed Magic much more than, Child's Play. And I'm just thinking, like, why are you even comparing the two? I mean, two completely different movies.
Yes.
And they always tend to enjoy movies that are more psychological than violent in any case, so that was a doomed comparison there.
There were a few okay scenes of violence in this movie. I have no idea what people consider the quote-unquote most memorable death scenes, but I always like the scene where Hopkins is using the puppet's hand to cut that guy's throat.
Yeah, it's a movie.
Well, I think what also really helps is just the amount of Hopkins' insanity, because he really, at least to me, he seems to really be acting like the puppet is a separate entity, and just I guess you can say back and forth between himself. When he has to go try to hide the body, for instance, in the lake. I mean, I don't know. It seems a lot more real to me than a lot of other, like, quote-unquote crazy killers you might see in horror movies. And that's probably mostly because Hopkins is such a good actor. But I do think it helps bring the movie up to a quote-unquote higher level.
Yes.
And it is certainly better than Carrie.
What? Get the fuck out of here.
Okay.
Get out! No.
Out of interest, you mentioned Ad Lauder's character. Well, do you know Ad Lauder from anything in specific? Because his face looks recognizable to me.
Yeah, I've seen him in heaps of movies, but usually as, just a supporting. Well, just as a role player in movies. Like, he doesn't play the main characters usually. So I remember him. I mean, he's been in some of the Death Wish movies, I believe, or at least one of them. I know I've seen him in that. To be honest, I wouldn't be able to, off the top of my head, remember everything I've seen him in, but I've definitely seen him in heaps of things.
Oh, look, he was in Cujo. That's interesting.
Yeah. He's got a recognizable face. Oh yeah, Revenge of the Nerds 2.
Some true classic cinema right there.
Raw Deal. Sorry, Raw Deal, which is an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. Yeah. So yeah, Death Wish 3. Yeah. So yeah, definitely seen him in a lot of movies, but yeah, just as a smaller character role.
Now, question of this movie being, if you were the woman, would you choose to go with Hopkins or Art Loughton?
Well, knowing what I know about Hopkins, that's a pretty simple choice for me. And even if I didn't know, I would probably still...
You'd stick with Loughton?
Yeah.
He seemed like pretty intense at times.
Pretty intense, but I think he had a decent suspicion about what was going on.
Well, after you find the Rolls Royce, it like sort of cuts down on possibilities.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of which, actually that fishing scene where both he and Hopkins go out in the small fishing boat, I think that's actually a pretty good scene too. It's decently intense. You see that Hopkins is just about to hit him, and then it's just, oh hey, a branch, and it's like Hopkins is like, oh hey, it's not the body, I'm cool. And then they happen to find the body, so that's always fun. So, Magic is a movie that I initially didn't necessarily love. I probably found it a bit on the sluggish side, and maybe to an extent it is. I'm not going to claim it's like a perfect 70s movie. There's certainly 70s movies I prefer to watch over this one. But I do think this is a pretty decent movie, and I think a lot of it is because of Anthony Hopkins. One other quick scene that I actually neglected to mention was the first scene with the puppet, where the guy goes, saying, hey, you have to check this guy out, and at first it seems like he's, failing hard, and then it turns out he has the puppet, and I sort of like the guy, oh hey, this is pretty good actually. I sort of like seeing his impressed face light up, and it makes me feel good that hey, Hopkins has finally, I guess, quote unquote, made it after failing, a year before. So I think Magic is a pretty good movie. It's definitely not for everyone's taste. Like if you're like a Child's Play fan, Magic might not be my next recommended horror movie for you. But I do think it's decent, and I would certainly recommend giving it a try at some point. So I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, it's a movie where the first half was pretty slow and uninteresting to me, and then the second half picked up. So I just find it tough to, like, if I wanted to rewatch this, I'm going to have to go through that first hour to watch that second hour. And who knows, maybe when I watch it again, I have an easier time watching it. But for now, Magic didn't have enough magic for me.
I see what you did.
It wasn't as magical as a movie titled Magic could be.
Oh god, stop.
I'm going to look. So basically, that first half of the movie, I was thinking, it's kind of like around a 5 or a 6, and then the second half was around a 7 or an 8. So I'm tossing up between a 6 and a 7 here. For now, I'm going with a 6, and I can see myself potentially giving it a 7 on a second viewing, but I'll wait until then, and who knows, maybe in a few years from now we might revisit it, talk about it again, and maybe my score will be different.
Well, speaking of killing nights, what is our next movie, Chucky?
Well, I don't know the title that you called it by, because I've just written down Night Killer.
I just called it by its original IMDb title.
Or we could call it by its alternate Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 title, which is just, hilariously absurd because it's got nothing to do with Texas
Well,
Chainsaw Massacre.
although
But
there's a history of that in Italian movies, so
yeah.
let's look at Zombie too.
But anyways, I mean, look, normally I describe the plot to a movie when we start talking about a movie, but for this one, to be honest, it's all over the place. I have no fucking idea what's going on. There's a guy in a mask killing people. There's this hostage situation thing going on. It's just mental.
Yeah.
I wish I'd watched the not behind the scenes. There was like an interview with the director on the Blu-ray that I've got. I wish I'd watched that again before this show because I know he said something about this movie it wasn't even meant to be a horror movie.
Yeah.
and then they later on like filmed scenes and put them in like extra gore scenes and things like that.
Yeah, from my understanding, the director being Claudio Fogasso, which isn't a name I'm particularly familiar with, to be honest. He was originally intending it to be more like a psychological crime thriller type movie. Then the people who were financing the movie weren't happy with it, so they brought in Bruno Mattei. He's a big name in Italian horror movies, so they brought him in to film some gory scenes, and then it sort of changed the whole dynamic of the movie. And from my understanding, it makes sense. Fogasso isn't very happy with the final copy.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a movie that I feel like it actually starts off pretty decent, like the first 20 minutes or so, up until you get to the hospital, I guess. There's multiple scenes with this guy in the mask going around, killing and stalking, killing some people, then he's stalking this one woman, and I was pretty into it, at least from those opening scenes. But as time goes along and shit's just going all over the place, it's just a mess of a movie, really.
Yeah, once it started focusing more on just the kidnapped victim as opposed to the random killings, I sort of tuned out.
Yeah, that's not to say that the movie as a whole doesn't have its fair moments of enjoyment or entertainment, but yeah, it is tough to watch in one way. I mean, I see a lot of people reviewing this movie because it's considered, one of these movies that's just so bad it's funny. And yes, there's certain scenes in the movie that you'd laugh at just because of how absurd and stupid they are. But I don't think it's like a consistent whole way throughout, like laugh-a-thon or anything like that. Like if I compared it to another so bad it's good type movie like Samurai Cop, that's a movie where almost every scene is funny unintentionally. Whereas this one, it's got its moments, but it's not consistently enjoyable throughout for that reason.
I have to also say the ending was a bit, I mean, I guess technically they explained it, but it just felt, I don't know, a bit weak. Like some of the character interactions before that point, I don't know, it just struck me as being really out of the box, and they threw it in just to have a sort of quote-unquote twist ending thrown in. I guess I just have a hard time believing some guy who loves another person would act that way, even if it's Ando. I don't know, it just struck me as bizarre.
Yeah, it's definitely bizarre. Speaking of bizarre, I mean, that scene closer to the start where he has to take off all his clothes and flush them in the toilet, and as soon as he like leaves, the guy's like, "Hey, where's your clothes?" And he's like, "I got molested in the little boy's room." I mean, what the fuck?
That sounds like a personal problem. But speaking of which, actually related to that very thing, the way the woman was acting, and I'll be honest, when the whole scene started, him honking at the woman, I had no idea that was the same woman who had gone through the, rape and torture. I had no idea it was the same woman until the beach scene. I'm like, oh hey, is it that woman? And hey, it was. But the way she was acting, I think in the movie says she was like disassociated. It was just like really out there. I mean, she pretty much allowed that guy to like treat her over, The whole thing was just bizarre. Hey, I saved you from suicide, so now I get you torture you. Like, what the fuck's going on in Italy? Like, what's going on over there?
Yeah, I remember the director interview. He said something about like say that scene at the beach where he's like almost drowning her to get her to drink seawater or whatever to throw up all the pills and stuff. He said I think he said like it was just like I don't know if you can see it in the movie, but it was like a really freezing cold morning, I think it was, where they filmed that. I mean, you expect the water to be cold. I mean, it's beach, but imagine her having to film that scene like in the freezing cold, even before you get into the water. I think they said they could only do like 1 or 2 takes, and then they had to stop because get hypothermia or some shit. So
I mean, just imagine putting that much effort into filming this movie.
yeah.
I mean, it really makes you feel bad for some of the actors, actually, because they obviously have no control over how the movies are going to be distributed and how people are going to take it. So, I mean, I'm not saying any of these actors are particularly amazing, but can't say that they did try.
Yeah, she puts in a pretty good performance, because I appreciate any performance where you get your tits out for an inexplicable reason. I mean,
that
why?
thing she was wearing was insanely yeah. I mean, I get that you're just around the house and you can wear whatever you want, but why even bother wearing clothes if you're just going to wear something that loose?
Yeah. She's in full makeup and everything. Like, do women usually get in full makeup and then just stroll around the house?
Well, you're the married one, not me, so.
Well, maybe that's the wrong person to be asking. Maybe it's the people who aren't married who do that. I don't know. Yeah. But I mean, look, from a perspective of violence and gore, there's some decent gore in the movie. Like, a lot of it's punching holes through people, which is highly unrealistic, but, pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess my issue was, it was okay the first few times, but it just got repetitive. Like,
Yeah.
It's like the only way he cares, but just punches him through the stomach. I mean, I guess, fine, you do you, but it's not much in the way of variety.
He really blew it with that one chick in the purple dress. I mean, he could have got some action there.
I sort of wonder, yeah, I'm not sure. He probably had problems.
Wow. Yeah. With people getting molested in little boys' rooms, there's a lot of people with problems. Anyways, to sum it up, this is just a mess of a movie that's got its moments of hilarity and absurdity, and, yeah, it's fucked. I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10 because I actually sort of enjoyed it, but it's just got so many issues and it's not consistently enjoyable throughout the entire thing. It goes up and down. So, yeah, 6 out of 10 from me. I'm sure I'll give this many spins in the future, so who knows? We'll see how I feel about it years from now.
Yeah, so if all of the movie had been like the opening sequence, which I actually thought was pretty good, sort of like a classic slasher setup, woman, gets caught by this guy and gets chased down by the killer and killed. I mean, I thought it was pretty decent. Aside from it's a really hokey mask the guy's wearing, but hey, he can do whatever he wants. I guess aside from killing people, he probably shouldn't be doing that. If the whole movie had been like that, I probably would have been okay. But once they start focusing on Tara Bachman's character, and she's the woman who survived the attack. Once they start focusing on her abduction, I start losing some interest.
Fried chicken.
Yeah, it's some quality KFC promotion right there. Because this is definitely the movie that KFC wants people to be watching to get their chicken. If you like fried chicken, it might be a type of movie, but it's enjoyable in its own way. It's it's obviously a bit silly. It has some charm to it, but it's not a good movie. And even though I'm sure people could probably watch this a couple of times, have a good laugh, it's not necessarily the most entertaining you can find. So I'm going to throw this one a 6 out of 10. Though I do want to say I am happy that Italy was still trying to make movies. By the time that the country's movie industry pretty much died out, so well done Italy. But even despite that, 6 out of 10.
Yes. I can't get over that one guy. Just his voice no matter what he tried to say, he just sounded creepy. I just want to be friends.
Yeah, I feel like saying I want to be friends and then kidnapping and attempting to. Yeah, it just struck me as not the way to strike up a friendship, but maybe it's like a foreign thing. Well, speaking of I'm not sure. Speaking of asylums, even though they didn't mention asylums, next
Nice.
up is I know I'm the segue master. Next up is the Arctic Expeditions from 2001. The plot's a bit difficult, but pretty much this guy is accused of murdering his girlfriend, and he is sentenced to a sort of I guess he goes into a coma. Then he's sentenced to like a psychiatrist thing, and he wakes up and he then gets sent to like a halfway house type thing, with a bunch of patients. But it turns out he's actually in an experiment being run by the doctor to find the whereabouts of some Satanist occult book of a murder that may or may not have happened from somebody who may or may not be his girlfriend, and the patients may or may not be patients, and it's a fantastic time. It's a movie that I can imagine will come across as frustrating to some people, and I say that because I'm one of the people it comes across as frustrating to. A lot of the story isn't really made clear, even with multiple rewatches, and it just comes across as a bit of a bizarre movie. There's certainly some things in the movie that make you enjoy it a bit more, such as Seth Green. Seth Green cracks me up in this movie, but overall, I'm not sure it's like the best form of entertainment.
Yeah, I remember renting this out on DVD back in the early 2000s. And I think mainly because my wife is a pretty big Jeffrey Combs fan, and I mean, Seth Green's fine by me, so, we gave it a watch then, and this is my first time watching it since then. And, it's your typical direct-to-video horror movie from that era, I guess. Like, it feels like a lot of other movies I watched around that time. Certainly not special. I wouldn't say bad, but I just didn't really feel one way or the other about this movie. It's really not my thing, but shit happens.
Yeah, I think it had some interesting concepts. There was like a sort of a small thing in which this one character is claiming that the woman leading the psychiatrist group was someone sneaking in like Satanist readings via another patient's toys. And that was, just an interesting conspiracy theory type thing. And there's a lot of small things that are mildly interesting, but I don't know if they're necessarily connected together that well. Like, I feel we don't really know enough about Jeffrey Combs' character to really understand why he's doing any of what he's doing. Like, one of my favorite scenes is it's pretty early on in the movie where he's just talking to the guy who woke up from a coma, and he's just rolling a joint in his office. That is a hardcore psychiatrist. I would definitely go under that guy's therapy.
He's got a prescription, man.
Yeah, he seemed somewhat iffy as far as ethics are concerned.
Yeah, I mean, when I watch a movie like this, I start focusing on just stupid little things, like towards the beginning where he's showing the I forget the character's name, the main mental guy in the movie. When Jeffrey Combs is showing him around, and he's like, "This is the quiet room," and they're just non-stop talking. I'm like, it doesn't sound like a quiet room. And there's like the one female patient in there. I'm surprised she wasn't like, "Shut the fuck up." I look on IMDb and I see someone say basically the only reason to watch this movie is for Ted Raimi's performance. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what was special about his performance? Is it just because his last name is Raimi that you like him?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about Raimi is that I know I've seen him in a few other movies. He was in Wishmaster Minute Meat Train,
yeah.
I think. But he's not like a big actor in any of those movies. Like, I recognize him, but it's not like his performance in this movie was like amazing.
I can't recall, but I assume he's like Sam Raimi's brother, is he?
I actually don't know.
I can't recall, but I'm just assuming that because I don't remember. Yeah, the highlight of movie roles that I remember this guy in is getting squished in Wishmaster for like a 20-second scene. But anyways, I mean, even the name of his character, Dr. Coffee, I feel like whoever wrote this fucking movie was just drinking some coffee and was like, gotta name another fucking character. Just call him Coffee. Yeah, that's about how much I care about the plot to the movie, and
I sort of like it when he first comes in and they just start to lock him up like he's a patient. Like, I wouldn't say had a phobia of, but the way that some of these mental institutions are portrayed in movies legitimately terrifies me. Like, I hope there's no institution out there that's as bad as some of these are portrayed, and I know in history they have been, but I'm hoping we've come past that point, because some of this stuff, like, I hate seeing it. Like, other patient mistreatment. Like, oh god.
I mean, the movie is advertised like they use Alice Cooper's name as a strong selling point. I don't recall him being in more than maybe 10 seconds of the movie.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so if, you're going because, hey, it stars Alice Cooper. Well,
I think he might have also had something to do with the soundtrack. I might be wrong about that, but he like either helped choose the music or something. It doesn't matter because it doesn't like impact the movie at all.
But I don't believe there was any actual Alice Cooper songs.
No, I don't believe so.
So, I think if you're an Alice Cooper fan, this isn't exactly, a movie that you need to be watching just because of his involvement. Because he pretty much has about as much involvement in the actual movie as I did. So, there you go. But hey, I guess if I have to look for one highlight...
And before the nudity.
Yeah, Faith, the redhead, I did appreciate that she managed to get the titties out, and I was wondering if the carpets matched the drapes, and at least there's that. So it wasn't all bad.
Yes, I've got nothing to say on that front. I will say I heard that the budget for this movie was pretty low, which you can obviously tell when watching.
It had a budget.
Well, yeah, so I will say, even though I'm not going to give this movie a particularly decent score.
I feel like, the actors just brought some things from home to use as props. Like Seth Green, you just wear whatever clothes you wear at home, and they don't even have wardrobes. It's just whatever.
I'll say I am impressed that with the budget they had, that they were able to make a movie almost competent. It just didn't come out as nearly as good as they were probably hoping. From my perspective, it's somewhat disjointed. I wish they would have clarified a few things. It's an interesting movie. It's just, much like yourself, it's not really my type of movie. When I watch a movie like this, I would like a bit more clarity by the ending, and that's not necessarily what we got here. So I'm going to give this movie a 5.5, and I think because of a few of the performances, including Jeffrey Combs, whose performance I didn't necessarily love, but I like seeing Jeffrey Combs. I think I'm going to give this a 5.5 and round it up to a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm going to give this one a 5. I didn't have a terrible time with it, but I didn't enjoy it. But I did enjoy Faith. So, I always look for the positive in these types of movies, and that was the positive for me. It gave me a raging positive.
Okay.
Okay. Up next, we've got Tammy and the T-Rex from 1994.
Which is a movie I have no idea why we watch.
Well, I don't know if it's just on the Blu-ray or not, but on the Blu-ray it's titled Tanny and the Teenage T-Rex.
No, I know there's a 2 on the print I was watching.
Yeah, so I haven't looked into too much why that is, because I believe her name in the movie is Tammy, so It just doesn't make sense. Or maybe someone... I mean, the N button is so close to the M button on a keyboard. Maybe they just accidentally put the N buttons instead of M. And they're like, fuck it, it couldn't be fucked going back and changing it now. Maybe that was the case. But, anywho, so this movie, essentially a evil scientist implants a brain of a high school student into a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and he escapes, he wreaks vengeance on his high school tormentors, and continues his quest to get into Tammy's panties, I guess. So, it's just a bonkers movie. You start off the movie with a fight where guys are just grabbing each other's crotches. It's like a serious fight too, so that makes it even more weird. Testicular standoff, as that one guy said. Yeah, and that pretty much sums up the movie, I think.
Yeah, probably not wrong.
Yeah, this movie was actually gorier than I was expecting, though. I was expecting a stupid movie, but I wasn't really expecting the level of gore that we got in the movie, like heads being ripped off and things. So, there were certainly moments to the movie that were enjoyable, but I think also, like I mentioned on one of the earlier movies we discussed, just inconsistent. I was finding parts of the movie I was having fun with, and then other parts I wasn't.
Yes. This movie is so far removed from what I'd usually be watching, and I'm not even sure what to say about it. The whole plot was, after a while, ridiculous, which I can imagine for many people as a selling point. Just this guy's brain being emplaced in a mechanical dinosaur body, and he's trying to communicate with his girlfriend like, hey, I'm alive and I'm a dinosaur machine guy now. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they had a basic story, but it seemed to be a bit all over the place. Some scenes, I'm assuming this whole thing was made as a joke. I don't really know the story behind it. But in some scenes, it seems like they're playing it a bit more serious. In other scenes, you know, like the gay guy, for instance, he was like obviously like intentionally over the top. So I mean, he was an interesting character, I guess, but I don't know. This is a type of movie that I've not really experienced much others like it before, and after seeing this, I'm somewhat hoping I never experience something like it again.
Yeah, it's nice to see that just, you know, a punch to the face from a woman is enough to knock you out for surgery, but it's an interesting sedative method.
I did occasionally like the the goofy doctor. I think he was going for like a German Swiss accent type thing, and he was sometimes funny. I could have done without the whole stereotypically named Helga, because Helga's the only name German women have. I could have done without her character, but the main doctor was, you know, in his own goofy way, somewhat amusing.
Yeah. I think, like earlier in the film, we see, okay, this Billy guy is just, you know, he's over the top asshole, and obviously once the dinosaur aspect comes into it, and we know, okay, you know, he's gonna come back as a dinosaur, and, you know, he's gonna kill these guys. I kind of felt like that should have been the story, as opposed to killing them in the first half hour and then just going off and doing all these other things. Spoiler alert, if I mean, I don't think anyone's going to care too much about spoiling anything in this movie, but when he does kill Billy, like rips his head off, and it was, you know, it's still in the earlier stages of the film, I'm just sitting there thinking, okay, so are we going to get credits now? I mean, what else is there to do? Like, the movie set it up so you come back, you kill him, and, you know, that's it. So, I don't know. I just felt like that's what the movie should have done, instead of doing that and then spending another almost hour just doing whatever.
Yeah, I certainly... a part of me wonders if they had necessarily a script in mind. I'm sure, like I said, they had a basic story, but I sort of wonder if some of this wasn't maybe made up on the spot.
We're just gonna make up a movie while we film it.
Like, it's like, hey, like 16 minutes before screening, hey, let's do this and start, guys. I mean, I don't know. It seems to me that a lot of this like stuff in this movie is somewhat loosely connected, and even once things start coming together, like the whole scene with the two friends like holding up cadavers. Hey, this body okay for you? And he's just like doing thumbs down, like, oh god, why am I watching this?
On another note, how is, like, I'm looking this up on IMDb and it's listed as PG-13. How is this PG-13?
I don't know about you, but I've been actually hearing about this movie a bit more recently, and I think part of it's because they recently found a lot of the goriest scenes.
Okay.
And initially, well, maybe not initially, but at some point, this movie was, released without the gory scenes, and because of that, it was probably a lot more, or obviously, it was a lot more family friendly because there's no gore. So, on a side note, I can't imagine watching this movie in those conditions. So I think because of the, I guess, recently found footage, they'll probably change it, I'd assume, to an R rating.
The scene towards the beginning where Denise Richards is on the phone to Paul Walker and she's like asking him to come over, and he's pretty excited, and I would be too, but that if that was me, it'd be like Roadrunner just leaving, like, pew. Just mentioning that.
Yeah, you're just hoping that she has condoms and you not care.
There are other ways. But look, despite the movie just being all over the place and not being consistently enjoyable, I do enjoy that they decided to end the movie with Denise Richards doing a striptease.
That went on way, way too long, though.
That's just, mwah. If you end any movie that way, it's going to end on a positive note. So I was left somewhat fulfilled.
So is that an 8 out of 10 then?
Not quite. Yeah, so like I said, I really enjoyed the ending to this film. And therefore, I am going to give this, like I've given multiple movies that we've discussed on today's show, a 6 out of 10. And, I need to watch this probably a couple more times because this is my first time watch, and I tend to have a different rating for a movie after I've seen it a few more times. So, yeah, if I get to watch Denise Richards for most of the movie, I mean, I'm not going to have a terrible time with it. So, 6 out of 10, there you go.
Yeah, so I guess my main issue with this is it was just way too goofy. It may not have always intended to be as goofy as it was, but some of the performances, such as the German doctor, obviously he was overplaying his character. So I'm assuming this was out of some type of joke, but there were some enjoyable scenes. There's some almost funny lines, I guess. I don't know. I'm just giving this one a 5 out of 10.
Well, sounds like you had a great time with it. And I like that when I look up this movie on IMDb, one of the first pictures that you can find of it is the crotch grabbing.
I will say I probably enjoyed this movie a little more than I usually had because I actually watched it with a friend of mine. So at least I had company while I was suffering through this, which made it. I mean, if I was watching this alone, I may not have gotten a 5.
And what did they have to say about the movie?
So I think the exact lines were they did not quote unquote have a bad time with it. Now,
nice.
To be fair, this guy is he was a zoology major, so he just likes seeing a dinosaur go around doing this type of stuff. So hey, as long as he had an okay time with it.
Well, there you go.
Speaking of using tools to murder people in an apartment complex, our following movie is The Toolbox Murders.
I mean, you can't see me, but I'm shaking my head right now.
I believe you. It's the Two Bucks Murders from 1978, and not to be confused with if anybody remembers the remake from 2004 by Toby Hooper. But the original 78 movie, in pretty much in which this guy in his key mask goes around killing people in an apartment complex. Then this one guy's sister disappears. He believes she's been kidnapped, so he and a friend sort of go looking for the kidnapped sister. And that's pretty much the movie. It's an interesting, I would say, mix. Like the first 25 minutes or so are almost inarguably pure slasher. Guy just comes in, murders a woman, murders another woman. I mean, it's like 3 straight murders in a single, like 20-minute fashion. And they are decently, if not explicitly gory, they all look painful. And then the movie changes course a bit into more like a hey, let's go find my sister, and sort of like an investigation type thing. And it might get a little boring around that time. And it is a 70s movie, so it always has the chance to come across as maybe a bit dry, a bit clinical. And then once we find out the individual behind these things, and he has his own type of monologues going on. It's interesting, but I can imagine people being, after watching the first 20 minutes, being disappointed by the way this movie goes.
Yeah, we didn't even really have to wait to see who the killer was.
Well,
as soon as that person came onto the screen, I knew who it was.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing about being a somewhat big actor. Because I've seen Cameron Mitchell in plenty of other movies around that time period. So I saw who it was first off.
To be honest, I'm not even that familiar with the actor, though. I'm sure I've seen him in other things, but I could just tell from certain close-up scenes where they zoom in on the guy in the mask. I can see by the eyes, or around the eyes, what this guy's face is kind of like. And so as soon as I see him without the mask, I know, I'm like, hey, that's him.
Yeah, so even if the guy committing the crimes doesn't come out as much of a surprise, they do try to throw in, I guess, I'm not sure if you want to call it a twist, but maybe a little surprise toward the end, revolving his family. So at least they have that going for it. But out of interest, I'm sort of curious, is this a movie that you've had a lot of experience with?
Not really. I don't even think I watched it in full before. I'd certainly started watching it at some point, and I don't know, I might have got distracted or had to stop to do something else. But so this is the first time I've watched it completely in full. I had an okay time with it. Like I said, the earlier scenes, there's a lot of kills and a lot of things going on there. But yeah, as the movie goes along, I don't necessarily think that the turns they were making throughout the movie were the directions I would have liked to see the movie go in. But with that being said, it's still, that was still fine. I didn't have a major issue with it. It just wasn't ideal.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of When a Stranger Calls, because that one had a fantastic beginning, and then like for the next hour it's like almost procedural investigation. I have a feeling that wasn't an uncommon route for 70s movies like this to take.
At times the editing in this movie was just a little weird. Like the one scene where the woman's masturbating in the tub, and it's like someone just started rapid pressing the button to change camera angles. It to me it just didn't make sense, but so I don't know what they were going for there.
Although I have to say, speaking, I don't know if it was in that exact scene, but one of the things I liked in this movie, there was it's like an old style, I guess you could say it's a country duet song. I think sang by some guy who's making music for the movie, a guy named George Deaton. But it had a song named, I think it was Pretty Lady, and they pretty much played the whole song during the scene where he's chasing the woman with, I think it's a nail gun. And I always liked the sort of calming, soothing music, while on screen you see all this carnage. It always brings back good memories.
Well, to all the ladies out there, you don't have to worry about me when I've got a toolbox, because the only thing in my toolbox is a tape measure. And that's to measure things.
I feel like if you've been working on that line for 2 weeks, you have some issues. If it makes any women feel bad, I don't have a toolbox because I don't do that type of stuff.
Yes.
So, once we find out who's committing these crimes, we find out the big reason for this. Well, obviously the guy's insane, but it's that special type of insanity I like to call religion. Guy's like a nutcase. His whole thing is he's trying to kill these women, basically because their sin is using sex and drugs and stuff, and he just wants to take care of all the sinners. And then he runs into a girl who reminds him of his daughter, who happens to be deceased. So of course this guy's insane, thinks it's his daughter, and then he starts talking to the girl like, hey, what was heaven like? And I'll give her credit, she came up with plausible, it's like purple and stuff. So I mean, I give her credit. But one thing that I actually enjoy about this movie is the performance of the religious maniac guy. I mean, obviously he's complete batshit insane, but he clearly believes everything he's talking about. And the opening scene where he is listening to like this religious sermon on the radio, there's a Baptist, pretty much brim and hellfire type sermon that isn't uncommon in this country. It just, if somebody takes the type of thing to heart, like take thine eye from thy neighbor, that can easily cause some problems. If somebody's religiously intolerant to more, I guess you could say, free lifestyles, less oppressed lifestyles. So I don't think that's the main point of this movie, but I appreciate pretty much the main reason the guy's killing people is, hey, he's a religious maniac. So A+.
Is that your rating, A+?
Not quite. But I guess we can talk about that. So I've seen this movie I think only once before, and I watched it again. It was actually the first movie I watched this month. And despite some tonal issues, I like Jackie says, once they sort of change tracks of where they're going, it's not really as good. I still think it's a pretty interesting movie. There's a character who gets set on fire, and that scene, I wouldn't say it comes out of nowhere, but it's certainly a scene that you might not necessarily see coming. I don't know, it's a movie I certainly like. I enjoy it probably more than I should. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5, which is above average for me. And I had to think about this. I think I'm probably going to round that down to a 7 out of 10. But I do think it's marginally above average. So 7.5 to 7 out of 10.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go with a 6. 6 out of 10. Which is kind of amusing because this is the 5th movie that we've discussed today, and I've pretty much given everything a 6 out of 10. So you can imagine what my week has been like watching movies. Everything's just been nah. Like I said, with movies that I've only ever watched once, my rating's going to change over time. So whenever I watch this one again, who knows, might go up to a 7. I doubt it'll go lower, to be honest. I feel like it can only get better. So for anyone listening out there, I know, check back in with us. Give us 3 years. Maybe we'll talk about it again. And if not, wait another 3 years.
And if you are still listening to us in 8 years, we appreciate your commitment.
Yeah, give us money. The final movie for today's show, and a movie that actually isn't out just yet. As of right now, I believe it's coming out in roughly about 3 weeks from now. Camp Twilight, which is obviously from 2020. So, what is this one about? Well, At the risk of failing to graduate, there's these 6 students who are forced to go on a weekend camping trip for extra credit, along with a couple of teachers. And they arrive at this place called Camp Twilight, which is, I guess, like a park which has a bit of a history to it, because there's people going missing, getting murdered, and all that kind of stuff. So, I guess I'll start off by saying, look, there's actually quite a few names in the movie that people might be aware of. You know, Felissa Rose is in the movie. In fact, she also co-wrote the movie, I believe. And if you don't know who that is, it's CWD from Sleepaway Camp, Chick with Dick. So, she's in the movie. You've also got Vernon Wells, who I know as the main bad guy from Commando, the guy that Arnold Schwarzenegger fights at the end. You got Linnea Quigley in it. Obviously, you know, that's a well-known name for B movies. And hey, Tracy Lear is in it. I don't know who she is, but I do now.
Oh boy, I was wondering if that was going to be one of our main disputes.
By the way, that one scene where she's talking to, I don't know if it's her husband in the movie, I think it was, or a partner, or whatever it was. But I'm surprised he could keep his eyes up during that conversation.
Well, he is an actor and he probably got paid, so...
What a professional.
I have to say, I'm not big on the whole, shall we say, not necessarily biological trusts. Those look somewhat fake to me. That's just me. I'm not an expert in...
All natural.
Yeah, so maybe it is, but that's not really my type of thing. I sort of enjoyed, like, every time she was on screen. I don't know if the actress has done a bunch of other things. I really don't know. Maybe she has, but it seems to me that the only reason she's in the movie is just so they can have a woman with some nice cleavage going on. Because if I recall, she didn't even have any nude scenes.
Well, to be honest, I mean, I'm glad she's in the movie just for that fact, because if the movie's not great in other areas, at least you've got something else to look at.
Are you saying that Felissa Rose wasn't enough for you?
Actually, when you mention that, I was actually going to say, I'm quite surprised at how milfy she is. I actually did find her somewhat attractive, which I never have in the past, but in this movie I did. So.
Are you saying you didn't find her attractive back in Sleepaway Camp?
Well, no. I mean, she's playing a child, so...
It's a safe answer.
Look, I mean, the only acceptable way to actually say, yes, I did, is if I was a kid at the time when I first saw the movie. So, if you're answering that question from the perspective as when you were a kid, that might be okay to answer, but no.
Yeah, actually, speaking of kids, I did want to give a shout out. Might be a bit strong. I think most of the I don't know how many of those people are actually teens, or I don't know their ages, but the 16 characters. Some of them weren't as good, but I thought all of them did at least competently, so I appreciated that. That one, God, I'm just trying to remember these characters' names. This one named, it looks like Haley Hopkins, and she played sort of like the I don't want to be here, sort of almost emo-ish type character, and I sort of liked her performance. And there's other people there too, like Harris Sebastian, who played like the very aggressive, like, hey, you ought to be with me type guy. I hated that character, so he did a good job too. So I'm not sure how much acting history those kids have between them, but I certainly did appreciate what they brought to the movie.
And while we're talking about the younger actors in the movie, I must say the younger girl playing the child version of Felissa Rose's character didn't look enough like her for me for that to, it didn't quite work for me.
Well, I think the whole sequence was ill-advised anyway, to be honest. Like, just from anytime there's a movie and then like the last 10 minutes is planned on, hey, this is exactly why we did what we did. Like, I get giving us, answers to characters' actions, but it seems like so stereotypical. Like it's like a villain hanging some guy over a shark tank. Now I will tell you my evil plan and why I did it. It just doesn't strike me as the best approach if I was the guy going around killing people.
Yeah. Speaking of that, like some of the shots in the movie, like people are either too close or too far away in certain scenes. Like there's a scene where they throw an axe from really far away.
That's an impressive throw.
Yeah, like if you've ever thrown an axe in real life, you would know that that does not look right.
Have you thrown axes in real life?
Yeah, well, I mean, I lived on a farm, so I could just throw one just for no reason, just because I'm out on board and you've got, equipment like that sitting around. But anyways,
I might be slightly different because I think it's entirely possible in my life I've never actually seen an axe outside of movies. So,
well, there you go. But yeah, like just still on the topic of people being either too close or too far away in certain shots. Like there was that one scene where I can't remember who it was. I think it was someone was trying to hide from the killer in the woods at night, and like they're hiding behind a tree. And to be honest, the killer looks like they're only like 2 meters from them, and I feel like there's no way they would not have seen this person hiding behind that tree, or at least when they leave the tree, they kind of move off. They would have seen that because they're like 2 meters away, and you would have heard them. I don't know. It just seemed odd to me.
Yeah, speaking of another, and this is pretty small, but I noticed there were probably a few, seems like audio mix-ups. I'm pretty sure there's one scene where a character was either screaming or saying something, but all we heard was the background music. We didn't hear the actual vocals. Which, I sort of actually rewound that scene, like, wait, did that actually happen? So, that was interesting. I don't see that very often. But, that's a small thing. It only happened as far as I could tell once.
Yeah. Did you notice there was this one scene with a dead girl? Sorry, I believe she was dead in the chair, and she blinked?
I did not notice that.
I was just so focused on the dead girl, because I think in that shot they had both the dead girl and the person behind them or next to them who discovers the body. And I'm guessing most people are focusing on the person that's alive, but I was focusing on the person that was dead. Like, I'm always looking to see, are they moving? How good are they acting dead? And it wasn't even like a really quick blink. It was a really normal blink. So I don't know. Go back and have a look if you got any interest. But that was amusing.
Yeah, I think that character was played by Angela Kluskowski. So, unfortunately, Angela, I'm sorry you made a small mistake.
But look, to be honest, don't worry too much. I mean, I think they spent all their money on the design for the opening credits.
Well, it's probably a combination of the design and the big names they have in the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen this in other movies. When a movie that seems like a somewhat modest, and this movie had a pretty decent production. It didn't look like a cheap movie. It had a glossy look to it. But when they have a movie that's not necessarily the highest budget movie, but they have a bunch of actors that people liked 20 years ago. Obviously, the good actors. I like Felissa Rose. I think she does a pretty good job. Her like overly poppy, hey guys, let's have fun.
She was super enthusiastic.
It's like Steve Come too.
Yeah. And to be fair, I mean, people usually aren't that enthusiastic with their roles, and I know that's part of the character, but yeah, she certainly put as much into it as she could, I guess, into her performance. I think, like, we look back on movies from, 80s and stuff, and even if the acting's bad, it's got that great 80s nostalgic vibe to it, and like in a movie like this where the acting could be is equally, you know, not great. You can't really hide it because, or you don't have that nostalgic aspect to it, and maybe in 30 years from now, people look back on these types of movies and start to feel different about them. But right now, it's just, yeah, those types of things just stand out too much and affect the movie, I think.
Yeah, like to me, it seems like I see slashers that aren't all that different from this, like all the time. A lot of the modern day slashers, most of them aren't terrible. They're like okay. They're like middle of the road. There's only a few in recent times that I remember giving like super low ratings to, because I'm a slasher fan. I enjoy slasher movies, and I think this one is still an okay movie. It just it lacks that special thing that makes it a really good movie. And I definitely think some of like the plot points, like the whole origin of like one of the characters in the movie, just seemed unnecessary. And then the final scene, it's just that character in the gas station. I didn't see the point, to be entirely honest. Like, okay, this character got away, That's I don't know.
And by the way, how does that girl in the gas station not hear the heels and footsteps like before she gets killed? Because it's completely silent.
Yes, that's another. Now maybe she was having hearing problems and her hearing aid was low on battery or something.
Yeah.
We don't know her life. Right?
Yeah. Look, I guess the problem here is that it's hard to have a passion project when you've just got so many things in the works, and I think that's the thing here is that, like I said earlier, Felissa Rose co-wrote this movie, and I don't know, she might have wrote a lot of it. I'm not sure, or maybe she only wrote a little bit. And I hadn't looked at everyone else involved in the movie, but I looked at what she is involved in more recently, and she's in there's roughly 30 movies that are either in pre-production or filming or post-production. So movies that she's been involved in that haven't come out yet. And when you're doing that much quantity, clearly what you're putting into each movie is not going to be the best quality. If you look at her list, there's at least 2 or 3 other movies that are to do with camps. So, let's just write a bunch of cheap camp slashers or camp horror movies, and it feels more like they're making movies based on a formula. And, that's fine. I mean, get whatever money you can, you put it up, you get whatever money you can, you move on to the next one. You probably don't have the time to spend on something, making sure the writing is top notch and all that. But I think that's the main issue with these movies, is that they try and just pump them out as quick as they can, and that definitely hurts the quality of a movie.
I mean, I don't know, I feel like for whatever budget they had for this movie, they did probably as much as they could. I wasn't a big fan of some of the writing, some of the plot points, but that just happens in modern day slashers. With a lot of modern day slashers, it's either they do a really good job, or it's going to be mediocre. And this one, at least to me, just felt more mediocre. I can't imagine remembering almost any of this, in 5 months. I just don't see it.
No. That was my point. One of my points down here is anyone who watches this, I can't imagine anyone 2 years later saying, "Ooh, time to watch Camp Twilight again." Yeah, I don't see it.
Yeah, so I think for me, despite the things I appreciated in the movie, I'm probably going to give this a below average rating of a 6 out of 10. And, that's not a terrible rating. It did some things I enjoyed. I thought most of the teen actors, whatever their past experience, I thought most of them did a pretty okay job. So it's certainly a movie it's not a terrible movie. It's just not a great movie, and it's probably not a good movie. But a 6 out of 10 seems like a it seems like a pretty fair rating for this.
Yeah, it's I'm going to go with a 4. 4 out of 10. I've certainly seen things that are much worse, and that there are reasons to watch this movie. I think if you like Felissa Rose, or Linnea Quigley's not in much of this movie, she's in like one scene, but if you're into any of the actors that are involved in this movie, that's probably a good enough reason to just watch it and enjoy it for that reason. But it's not all that different from a lot of other low budget independent type movies. And unless you're a fan of low budget independent movies that are made on the cheap, you're probably not going to have a great time with it. But like I said, hey, at least they throw in Tracy Lear for me. I mean, she's not exactly the kind of woman I go for, but hey, I appreciate titties.
I do think she's probably one of the most pointless characters in the movie, but and to be fair, we didn't even talk about the detectives, the park rangers, which is probably for the bother.